With all the events of the last few weeks, you might want to get away to a place like this, like my parents' farm, where it just seems beautiful and peaceful and tranquil. I mean, the events of the last few weeks have brought up all these emotions within us. It all begins with COVID-19, doesn't it? I mean, we're trapped in, there's anxiety, there's fear, there's loss of loved ones. There's all this stuff going on with COVID-19. And then on top of that was the Ahmaud Arbery case of a few weeks ago. And then you had the actions which led to the murder of George Floyd. And then there were the protests. And then the looting and vandalism. I mean, it just seems too much, right? You want to get away to a place where there's flowers and all this nice stuff. And when you talk to people, when I talk to people, there's a mixture of emotions, isn't there? There's anger, there's frustration, there's unknown, there's a fear from a variety of sources, right? It's not all one thing. Again, it all begins with COVID-19. I mean, things would feel different if we weren't dealing with COVID-19. Doesn't mean to dismiss anything, but it's a part of it. You have the clear-cut racism and violence and shooting of Ahmaud Arbery. And then you have the actions that led to the murder of George Floyd, with all the sense of feeling of racism around it. There's the actions of a few police officers that were clearly wrong. And some would say, well, that's one police officer. It doesn't speak for all the police officers, then that's true. Because our police officers care for us, and they protect us, and they do a great job. But then there's the feelings about the protests. Some of them are quiet, some of them are not so quiet. And then there's the actions of our president and the other leaders that bring in more to this. There's the looting and vandalism that has nothing with the protests, but people on their own taking advantage of a situation. I mean, there's just so much that you just want to get away. And the Christian response to all this, it's varied as well, right? I mean, you have some that say, let's protest, let's get out on the streets. Others that say, let's just be meditative and quiet and peaceful. There's some that don't want to think about any of it. They don't want to turn on the TV because they believe their life with Christ is to be in a place like this, as beautiful as it is. And there's others that want time to think and reflect. They see the sin and they said, this is what it lives like in the world today. The question is, how do we respond? Now, we've been going through this letter of 1 Peter. And Peter would have some words for this situation. Peter is speaking to a people who are persecuted. They're suffering and they're having actions done against them because of what they believe. They're in exile and they're scattered. They're scared and they're wondering, God, where are you in the midst of this? And Peter brings in words to them. Words that where he wants to speak to them. He says, I don't want you to get away from it to a farm like this and try to be peaceful. I want you to respond. The question is how? I want you to listen to Peter's words on this. This is 1 Peter 3, 8-12. Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Needed to get out of the greenhouse. It was too hot in there for me. So Peter reads these words to this people who are suffering. They're being abused. They're being persecuted. And he has words of wisdom for them. And when you think of these words, I want you to think of this action. Talk to the hand, because the face isn't listening, or the ears are not listening. Talk to the hand. Now, we've seen this action as an action of dismissiveness, where I'm not listening to you right now. And for many people who suffer, who are persecuted, that's how they're feeling, or that's what they're seeing people are doing to them. But I want you to think about this in a different way. Because Peter says there's 5 things, like the 4 fingers and the thumb. 5 things that we are to remember that all come out of the heart of Jesus and his love, his sacrificial love for you and me. So think of the hands. He says this. He says, have unity of mind. It could be unity of mind, unity of spirit. It's to live harmoniously. Reminds me of Paul's words to the Philippian church in 1:27. He says, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you're standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. He says, have this unity of mind, this unity of spirit, this willingness to live it out together. That's number 1. Number 2 is to have sympathy. That's that readiness to be excited when someone else is excited. To mourn when someone else is mourning. To be willing to suffer when someone else is suffering. It's not just this action, I'll join in with you, but it's a feeling, a deep within, that what you're feeling, I'm feeling as well, sympathy. And then number 3, brotherly love. This word Philadelphia, this love for one another that is there, that goes beyond everything else. There's a tender heart, which is a heart that is, it literally means to come from the inner depths of the organs. And they thought the organs, the kidneys, is where that the heart was, if you will. And so there's this sense of coming from depths within our heart, having this overwhelming sense of care and compassion, to listen to one another, to listen to others, to their side, to their experience, to be willing to be sympathetic with what they've gone through. And then 5, to have a humble mind. It's this general outlook on life that is the opposite of pride that it says in Proverbs 29:23. It's taking up the towel, if you will, like Jesus Christ did when Peter had his feet washed. And Peter saw those actions of Jesus and said, we're to do the same. We're to do those 5 things. Have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, tender heart, and a humble mind. And he sums it all up in a different way. He says, do not repay evil for evil, or reviling for reviling. Just a little ahead of this, in chapter 2, Peter said this about Jesus. When Jesus was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continually entrusted himself to him who judges justly. That we're to be like Christ. We're not to repay evil, for reviling for revival. But on the contrary, bless. That we're to bless others, to speak positively about them to God, to ask God to bring those great things out to them and to God, to bring them before God. And he says, you are called to this in verse 9. And if we bless in order to obtain a blessing. And then Peter uses these words from Psalm 34. Psalm 34 is a psalm of David, and David is describing the story that when he was on the run from Saul, he ran to the Philistines, the arch enemy, and he went to the king Achish, and under King Achish, David was living, but then all the army generals from the Philistines said, "Hey, wait a minute, that's the commander of the Israelites. That's David who's killed thousands of us." And David got scared. And David in his fear started to act like a crazy man. He started scratching the walls. He allowed spittle to come down his face and beard. I'm not going to show it for you. But out of that, King Achish said, "I already have enough madmen like this. Don't worry about him." And David wrote Psalm 34 about that, where he gave praise to God because God rescued him. And in the midst of Psalm 34 are these words that Peter brings up. He says, "And this is the reason why we bless others. Whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it." In other words, if you want to love life and have good days, don't fight back with that. Don't do the evil. Don't do the deceit. Seek peace. And he says, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears open to their prayer, but the face of the Lord against those who do evil. In other words, God's face is against those who do evil, but if you do what's right, God's going to hear your prayers, and you're going to get a blessing. You're going to obtain, or you're going to inherit a blessing here and now. So what does that mean for the situation that we have right now? Well, the answer is not to run away. It's not to run away to my parents' farm, although I'm sure they'd love to see you. It's not to go to a place where you just want to get away from it all. But it's that willingness to engage and to listen. To listen to a number of different sources. But not to repay evil for evil. Not reviling for reviling. To stand up for justice. To stand up for justice for those who've been wronged. To stand up for justice for those who are going against looting. I mean, it's the whole package. We need to stand for justice in all these things. It's the ability to listen. To talk to the hand. To have unity of mind with that person. Sympathy. Brotherly love. A tender heart and a humble mind. Instead of reviling or evil, to bless. We are called to be a blessing. We're called to this. To be a blessing just like Jesus was a blessing. Even when we suffer persecution. And guess what? God will hear your prayers. So think of your hand. The 5 things that you're to do. And may God bless you as you do them. Have a great day. Can't wait to be back with you. We'll be back together soon. Bye.